Hey there, I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles, and right now we've got the latest on that ethics investigation into former Congressman Matt Gaetz. What they learned, when they learned it, and how this all factors into his future in Washington. We're headed to Capitol Hill for all that in just a minute. Plus, first, it was New Jersey, then New York, then Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and hey, now we can add Texas to the list of states spotting those mysterious drones. We're going to talk to a chief of police there who is investigating those sightings. And could SCOTUS save TikTok? The High Court is taking on whether or not to ban the app, and we're going to break down where the case stands tonight with our legal experts.
Hear the TikTok case. Thank you. We'll hear it on January 10th and have a ruling anytime after that. Before January 19th, please. Because the inauguration, it's the deadline Congress set for us to sell TikTok or be banned in the U.S.
Those are just a few of the stories that we're on top of this hour. A lot to unpack. We're going to dive right in. This is Stay Tuned Now. Matt Gaetz might be done with Congress, but it looks like Congress is not done with Matt Gaetz. We start tonight in Washington, where a secret vote could now give us all a look at what's in that ethics report on Matt Gaetz. That report looks into a bunch of accusations against Gaetz, including allegations of sexual misconduct and drug use, which Gaetz denies. Now, we all know that Gaetz was Trump's pick to be Attorney General, but then he pulled his name out of consideration, and we are hearing partly because of this report. Gaetz doesn't seem to be taking any of this lying down, though. Once again, he is denying some of the big allegations against him, writing today in a post on X that he was exonerated on all charges by the Justice Department, but also admitting that his 30s were an era of working hard, working very hard, and playing hard, too, saying that it is embarrassing but not criminal. Now let's bring in NBC's Ryan Nobles from Capitol Hill. Ryan, so we're hearing embarrassing but not criminal. You got to wonder, what is he talking about? What is embarrassing but not criminal? When are these details going to come out here?
Yeah, so, we've known for some time what the Ethics Committee has been investigating, and these are accusations that Matt Gaetz was involved in illicit drug use and sexual misconduct. Some of the accusations include him having sex with women that were underage. We know from the lawyer of some of the witnesses involved that they testified that they saw him at sex parties having intercourse with women that were underage. That's something that Gaetz has repeatedly denied. And when he says embarrassing, he admits that he did take part in some of these parties, that he did drink quite a bit, that he smoked marijuana and other drugs at that time, but none of it was illegal. And none of it was while he was a member of Congress. And so that's one of the reasons that he believes that this report shouldn't see the light of day. It's also one of the reasons that he argues that the Justice Department looked into these allegations, but then ultimately decided not to pursue charges because they didn't believe they could convict him on these charges. So that is not enough, apparently, for the Ethics Committee, which believes that this report needs to get out there, which is one of the reasons that they voted in secret to make it happen, and we're expecting to see it later this week.
They voted in secret, and yet once upon a time, Speaker Johnson said releasing all this would set a dangerous precedent. Did anything change here?
I think more than anything, nothing really changed, Gadi. I think what we saw play out here is that the Ethics Committee exerted its independence. It's always prided itself on being an independent body within Congress. It is equal parts Republican and Democrat, so therefore that forces the panel to be bipartisan. And usually speakers of the House do not inject themselves into debates that take place within the Ethics Committee. The fact that Mike Johnson chose to do that was in itself unprecedented. The committee decided to make this decision on their own, regardless of what Speaker Johnson had to say, and that's part of the reason you're going to see this report released in the near future.
And Ryan, we should note that Gaetz ended his tweet by blasting the short-term funding bill, which can stop the government shutdown. It was the end of the tweet, but it is the thing that's looming over Capitol Hill right now, and that is the other big story tonight. What is going on with the potential shutdown?
Well, lawmakers thought they had a deal, Gadi. It was a massive spending bill, would have provided $100 billion in relief for those impacted by the recent hurricanes and natural disasters. And it was also going to provide $10 billion in farming subsidies. The problem, though, was it turned into a Christmas tree, which is apt for this time of year, where lawmakers just found ways to add on their own ornaments to this piece of legislation. And it grew to the point where conservatives just decided it was out of control. You first saw conservative influencers like Elon Musk and Donald Trump Jr. come out and say that Republicans should reject this spending bill. But then Donald Trump himself weighed in and said he did not want to see this bill passed. So now they're back to square one. We expect Speaker Johnson to come up with a plan B that would probably be a slimmed down version of this original plan that maybe only includes the disaster relief and the farm bill funding in addition to the regular funding of government. But right now, we haven't seen that plan, and the clock is ticking with the deadline of midnight on Friday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that Christmas tree has quite so much pork on it come Christmas. Ryan, thank you. And tonight in the drone mystery saga, White House officials trying to clear up confusion, and then the president himself giving an answer that raises a lot more questions. Listen to this.
We know of no threat to people's security. And if we learn of any cause for concern, we will take action and we will communicate immediately with the American public.
Nothing nefarious, apparently, but they're checking it all out. I think it's just one. There's a lot of drones authorized up there. I think one started and they all got everybody wanted to get in the deal. But we're following it closely. So far, no sense of the danger.
Nothing nefarious. Everyone wanted to get in on the deal. That's the word from the White House, while the Pentagon has confirmed unidentified drones buzzing around U.S. military facilities, including 2 out of New Jersey, an Air Force base in Ohio that had its airspace shut down at one point, and unconfirmed reports near Marine Base Camp Pendleton in California. The DoD even sending in anti-drone tech.
Counter UAS capabilities, things like let me make sure I get the name right here, like drone busters, which essentially, emits a signal which is able to interrupt the signal on the drone, which can affect its flight.
Who are you going to call? Drone busters, built to take drones out of the sky, but only if they, quote, possess a clear and present danger, which officials say hasn't happened yet. Meanwhile, a police department in North Texas and the FBI are investigating new reports of drones flying near federal and military property near Fort Worth. The police chief of White Settlement, Texas, says the sightings happened in no-fly zones last night. He posted these pictures, and he's calling those sightings concerning, but that there is no immediate threat. Joining us now is that Chief Christopher Cook. Chief, thank you so much for being with us. Have you been able to confirm through the day that this is a drone and who might be flying it?
Yeah, so we responded to several calls last night. Started around 8:14. Kind of the officers were chasing these drones around for about 2 hours. Unfortunately, we were not able to determine who was piloting these aircraft, but our officers were able to get some cell phone video. At one point, the officer reported hearing the rotors. So we know this is not a fixed aircraft. It's not a helicopter. It was certainly an unmanned aerial vehicle. And the reason I guess it's concerning to us, number one, from a safety perspective, we have military aircraft in our community that transit the area all days, hours of the day and night. And then secondly, if an aircraft was to impact, or let's say one of these drones goes down a engine, that's a really bad day, certainly for the pilot, and can lead to a catastrophic loss of the aircraft. We don't know who's behind these drones. We don't know why they were flying, but it is a no-fly zone in our community because of the proximity to the federal and military properties.
And speaking of some of those properties, look, Lockheed has a facility in your neck of the woods, right? Is there a possibility that it might have been them testing out some tech here?
No, so we have a great partnership with the Air Force plant, Lockheed, also the Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base, Fort Worth. And so they're a partner agency. And so they work with us on this. And so unfortunately, I wish I had some answers as to who was behind this. We don't even know. Again, there was no active threat that was determined. But the question is, why would you violate the national airspace system, and why would you operate? What is your intent? And until we really get our hands on who was behind this, we just have more questions than we have the answers right now.
And right now, I mean, New Jersey has been getting so much attention for this, but for those that have been paying attention, these types of incursions have been happening for quite some time. In Texas, have you seen this level of activity before, or what do you think's going on?
Yeah, it's not out of the norm that we would have a drone incursion. We call it an incursion because, again, you're not supposed to fly in this airspace. There's a specific authorization to go through. However, most of the time we do not have night incursions. This is probably in the last 3 years that I've been chief here, where we've had a influx of drone activity at night. Again, we don't know if they're taking photos, if they're taking video, if they're just trying to, make a splash because of what's happening in the Northeast, like a copycat. So working with the FBI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and the Navy base, hopefully we'll get some answers soon. We do take this type of concerning behavior very serious. And again, there are criminal and civil penalties to operate in a no-fly zone near a federal or military property.
And Chief, real quick before we let you go, descriptions of those drones, we've heard some are the size of like a small car, or possibly an SUV. Others look like they're those commercial ones that you can get off the shelf. What are the ones out there in your skies looking like?
So last night, both police officers that intercepted these drone flights, they were small. They looked like consumer off-the-shelf kind of drones. The only thing is they were not broadcasting a remote ID, so we were not able to track, where they took off and where they landed. So again, working with our federal partners, hopefully we'll have some answers soon. But these are definitely smaller kind of handheld type drones.
Got it. Chief Christopher Cook, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
And police in Wisconsin are looking into whether bullying may have played a role in that deadly shooting at a Christian school in Madison. Meanwhile, that community there is still processing the tragedy just days before Christmas.
We are heartbroken. It's just not going to be the same. What is Christmas when your little didn't come home from dinner yesterday?
Absolutely heartbreaking. This right here, this is one of the first pictures we've verified of the suspect. Police say she killed herself after the rampage. And while her motive right now remains a mystery, questions are also rising if her parents should also face charges. That's something Wisconsin's Attorney General didn't exactly rule out.
Are charges for the parents something that could happen?
Well, in any case, you want to investigate the facts fully and figure out precisely what happened. I'm confident that's what the Madison police are doing here.
NBC's Shaquille Brewster is in Wisconsin with the latest tonight.
Good evening to you. And unlike the past couple of days, we did not get that briefing today from the chief of police or other city leaders. But I'll tell you, there's been a lot of new information that we've learned and activity that we've been seeing even at the site of the school where that 15-year-old female suspect opened fire just 2 days ago. We are seeing now for the first time groups of students. I believe we have some video that I can show you, or at least groups of young people going into the school, at least a portion of the school, walking in large groups. We've seen them come out with these large black bags, some of them with a clear label on them. Presumably, they're retrieving some of those items that were left behind, but the city not clarifying or explaining what activity we're seeing here. But that just shows you how we're entering a new phase in this investigation and how the community is entering a new phase in this recovery. I want you to listen to a little bit of my conversation with the executive director of the school system in which the school is a part of, but it's also other Christian schools in this area, where he says, first, that students at the school will not be returning until no sooner than January 2nd of next year. But he gives us an update on 2 of the students who are still in the hospital with those life-threatening injuries.
The 2 children that are still in the hospital are in very grave conditions, and we covet the prayers of everybody for their survivability, which is in doubt. Will they be able to celebrate Christmas without thinking about a school shooting at their school in the past? It's very hard to imagine this. We're broken in our hearts.
I'll tell you, the pain that you hear in his voice was certainly reflected in the conversations that I had at that vigil that I was reporting from last night. Meanwhile, as the community continues to grieve, the investigation continues, and we're learning more via some court documents about the home that this 15-year-old suspected shooter was raised in. The court documents showing that her parents were married and divorced multiple times since 2011, and that back in July of 2022, her parents sought mediation essentially for a custody agreement. Part of that agreement was based, according to these court documents, on recommendations from the therapist of their daughter. Now, this, of course, was several years back, but this will certainly be part of the investigation. As we know, investigators are trying to piece together not just the motive for the shooting, which police chief says multiple factors likely contributed, or this was motivated by multiple factors, but they also are trying to drill down on how this 15-year-old suspected shooter was able to get access to the weapon. Again, we have not heard an update from police and investigators just yet, but that is definitely a question that many people here in this community are wondering tonight. Back to you.
Shaq Brewster, thank you. Now, this next sentence is going to need a little processing for us here in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Deputy Mayor of Public Safety is under FBI investigation for allegedly calling in a bomb threat to City Hall earlier this year. The mayor's office confirmed today that Brian Williams is on administrative leave after the FBI searched his home yesterday. So the question is, did he do it and why? David Noriega joins us now. David, okay, again, let me just reread this.
It's worth dwelling on.
Los Angeles Deputy Mayor of Public Safety allegedly called in a bomb threat to City Hall? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. So far, way more questions than answers. We have to remember that Williams has not been arrested yet. He hasn't been charged yet. All we know is that there is an investigation that included the FBI searching his home. Yeah, searching his home. Here's a little bit else. Here's a little bit what we know. So the mayor and the PD, the LAPD, have put out statements, both of which are interesting for different reasons. The mayor only says that Williams has been put on administrative leave and that this bomb threat happened at some point earlier this year, but we don't even know when the bomb threat really happened. Then the LAPD statement is particularly interesting because in it, they say that they were initially investigating this. They got the initial report when it led them to Williams, with whom they had a working relationship because, again, he is the deputy mayor for public safety of the city of Los Angeles. They had to basically back off and hand it to the FBI. That's why the FBI is investigating him. We don't know anything about his motive. We know very little, again, even about when this happened, but it certainly raises a lot of questions, primarily for the mayor's office to contend with.
And what do we know about Mr. Williams here?
So he's a sort of career civil servant bureaucrat who spent some time particularly in that kind of like civilian administrative side of law enforcement. He worked for a while as the executive director of the Civilian Oversight Commission for the LA Sheriff's Department, which is the largest sheriff's department in the country, major law enforcement organization. He was deputy mayor previously under Mayor Hahn in the early 2000s. So it's definitely strange that a person with this career and sort of this advanced into his career would allegedly do something like this. Again, he hasn't been arrested or charged. Motive, again, is the biggest question here. What would lead somebody with that profile to call in a bomb threat of their own place of work, right? City Hall, in this case. We are all awaiting more information.
And we're getting statements from City Hall, and we're getting statements from LAPD. Again, there's always the option of just like keeping this as quiet as possible. These statements coming out, pretty remarkable here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, again, it's the mayor's office that primarily is going to have to answer questions moving forward. What happened here? How was this person on staff in the first place? What they're going to have to account sort of for a lot in this situation.
Could be anything. Could be anything. We shall wait and see. David Noriega, thanks so much for being with us. And the NTSB is looking into why a cargo plane crashed into a building and burst into flames in Hawaii. This all happened shortly after takeoff, and it killed both pilots on board. NBC's Liz Kreutz has more. Liz?
Tonight, the NTSB investigating what caused this small cargo plane in Hawaii to spiral out of control near a busy highway before crashing into a building near the Honolulu airport.
I was working and all of a sudden had a loud one big boom.
This dash cam video showing the horrifying final moments of the flight.
Kamaka 689, you're turning right? Kamaka 689, we are out of control here.
The Kamaka Air Cessna 208 slamming into an abandoned building, killing the two people on board who were conducting a training flight, according to the airline.
I was sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden I saw a small plane fly past my office window. We started banking and turning back towards the airport, and then I heard a loud bang.
The crash creating this massive plume of smoke and flames seen for miles. First responders rushing to the scene.
Fortunately, the building is an abandoned building, so this is the best case scenario. No one else was involved in two souls that were lost. So.
The victims identified by family as Preston Kaluhiwa and Hiram DeFries, young pilots in their 20s.
And officials are praising the men, saying they avoided populated areas and even a nearby fuel farm. The building they crashed into was empty and had been set to be demolished. Back to you.
Liz Kreutz, thank you. And depending on where you are in the country, the weather's kind of been all over the place today. Here on the West Coast, there is elevated fire condition, and that sparked this fire overnight in Southern California, leading to an evacuation order. Luckily, firefighters there quickly got a handle on it before it could spread some more. The rest of the day was pretty pleasant, but the winds are a little high. Jumping over to the East Coast, where storms flooded neighborhoods in southeast Florida. In case if you know, this is the part of Florida that is very prone to flooding, and people are just fed up.
The cars are actually stuck in the water. You can't get through up here in Fort Lauderdale. This is absolutely ridiculous that anytime we have more than 2 hours of rain, this is what happens.
There's another round of storms moving in that's also going to bring more rain and snow to parts of the Midwest and Northeast over the next couple of days. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is tracking all of it. Hey there, Bill.
Gadi, we have an active forecast as we go through the holiday period. We're not going to be watching a lot of cold air, but we are going to be watching fast-moving storms, and that's going to be the theme right out through New Year's. So the first storm that we're watching heading for the East Coast tonight, a little bit of rain in areas for the big cities in I-95, not really causing too many issues. A little bit of snow for the interior. Some of the high elevations in the Catskills and other areas will pick up 1 to 3 inches of snow. Shouldn't be a huge ordeal. Maybe just a little slippery conditions early in the morning. This is our next storm. This one has a little more punch to it. We call this an Alberta Clipper-like storm. It's a fast-moving storm, has cold air with it, and it has really cold air behind it. This is now racing down into the northern plains. We have winter storm warnings that are up from Minot to Fargo, Duluth, Minneapolis, St. Paul to Green Bay. So we got about 11 million people again be impacted by the storm. And this is one of the first significant snow events that we've actually had rolling through this winter through this region. So for many people, this will be the first time driving in the snow once again, and we may get some school delays and cancellations. The worst of it is going to be sliding through Minneapolis tomorrow morning for the morning commute. So Minneapolis, St. Paul, keep that in mind. For Wisconsin, it's going to be mostly during the day on Thursday. And then by the time we get to Thursday night, a little bit here north of Chicago into areas of Michigan. Then the storm weakens as it rolls through the Ohio Valley. Still some snow, but not the heavier amounts. And then just some snow showers by the time it reaches the East Coast. It may be cold on a Friday night, even around New York City and the Hudson Valley could get some snow to Buffalo, Syracuse, and also some of the mountains there in West Virginia and also Virginia. So this is the snow forecast with this Clipper storm. Notice the higher amounts here shown in the darker blue. That's plowable up to 4 inches to 6 inches here from Green Bay just north of Milwaukee to Madison, north of Madison here to La Crosse to Minneapolis to Fargo. Those are all areas that you're going to have to do some shoveling. And then lighter amounts through the Ohio Valley, 1 to 2 inches possible in many areas. Some of the mountainous areas in the Catskills and the southern tier of New York will get a little more than that, but more nuisance stuff as we go throughout the forecast. And then I mentioned it's a cold blast behind us. It's not going to last long, but it will be bitterly cold. So that cold invasion begins on Thursday. High of only 8 degrees in Montana there in Glasgow. Minot right around 12. Then it begins to feed down through areas of the northern plains. Minneapolis, temperatures plummeting during the day on Friday. High temperature 17, Fargo 8. Wind chill will be much colder than that. And here's your wind chill forecast as we go throughout the weekend. This is going to be the coldest wind chills expected. Chicago 9, 13, and 12 this weekend. Look at northern Vermont. Sunday, -8. Monday, -3. Even New York City will have single-digit wind chills. So this will be some of the coldest air that we've seen. But as I mentioned, this is short-lived. We have numerous storms that are going to come into the northern half of the West Coast, especially the Pacific Northwest. They're going to bring mild air with them right through the holiday week from Christmas all the way to New Year's. So we're expecting warmer than average temperatures coast to coast. It's going to be hard-pressed to find anywhere cold because all that Arctic air is going to be bottled up well into the North Pole. And here's next week's temperature outlook. This is right through the heart of Christmas. Warmer than average temperatures everywhere. If it was below average, it'd be shown in blue. None of that on the board. So, Gadi, there actually may be more people out there barbecuing on Christmas than anything else, especially the southern half of the country. It looks like it's going to be very, very mild.
Maybe we'll get our barbecues out over here too, Bill Cairns. Thank you so much. And don't go anywhere. We've got so much more ahead. Coming up, classes in session. How a high-tech high school is helping future doctors and nurses get a head start on their careers. That's coming up in the Future of Everything. But first, the brewing border battle ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's first day back in the Oval Office. The struggles ICE agents are already dealing with before any major deportation plans are put into place. Our Gabe Gutierrez gets an inside look coming up next. Hey, welcome back, and here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Sean Diddy Combs was back in court today for a status conference. And federal prosecutors say they can't comment on any possible new charges against him, and they've also said they're on track to present all the discovery in their case to the defense by the end of the year. The next hearing is scheduled for March. And Luigi Mangione is now making a court appearance tomorrow morning where he could be extradited from Pennsylvania to New York. He's been indicted on 11 charges, including first-degree murder, accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. And the markets tanked today. This was one of the biggest losing streaks since the 1970s. This is after the Fed announced a point cut to its key interest rate. It comes as inflation is still a bit elevated, and the Feds are expecting fewer rate cuts next year. And a person from Louisiana has been hospitalized with bird flu. This is the first severe human case here in the United States. The CDC says the person was most likely exposed to a flock of birds in a backyard, and so far this year, 61 Americans have been infected with avian flu. And while the clock is ticking down to mark the end of the year, 2025 has already arrived in Times Square. At least those giant numbers have, though they touched down at the center of Manhattan today, and the sign will remain on the ground until December 23rd, welcoming tourists and visitors to get those selfies, I guess. And whether you're going to be able to keep scrolling on TikTok next month or not, that decision now lays with the Supreme Court. TikTok has been challenging the federal law that could ban the app in the United States, and they've been calling it a violation of free speech under the First Amendment. They filed an appeal with the Supreme Court just yesterday, and today the court has said it will take up the case, and it will take it up pretty quick. So what is that going to mean? Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Angela Sinandela. Angela, thanks so much for being with us. Clock's ticking for TikTok, but the timeline is really interesting here. The Supreme Court is now saying that it's going to hear oral arguments January 10th. The law is supposed to go into effect January 19th. If the Supreme Court decides in their favor, are we going to find out like a couple of days after these oral arguments, or is it going to go past that deadline?
All right, Gadi, look, just like always, there are many possibilities. So what the Supreme Court did not do is that while they did agree to hear this appeal, they did not agree to stay the ban, meaning they didn't agree to pause the ban until they were to hear it. But what they could still do is after oral arguments, so after January 10th, when they actually hear the arguments, they could then decide to still stay the ban, meaning pause the ban until they made the decision. So either if they don't do that, they're going to make a decision between January 10th and January 19th and issue the opinion ruling formally, or they will then issue the pause while they then make their decision and then perhaps then give time for the new administration to come in, Gadi.
And is it me, or does it seem like the Supreme Court moved pretty quickly to accept this?
Yeah, they moved extraordinarily quickly. So just to give you some context, the Supreme Court only takes about 1% of the cases that are petitioned to them. So that's about 80 across 8,000 that are filed with them. Now, usually this happens across the course of months and never over holidays. But look, with the January 10th oral argument deadline, that also means that by December 27th, briefs have to be filed. By January 3rd is when reply briefs have to be filed. So that means over the holidays, they are moving in such an expedited manner, and I think it's because they did not want to pause the ban, but they felt this whole issue was huge enough they had to address it to the public.
I don't think people realize how huge this can possibly be. Like, everybody's focused on their phones and TikTok, but is there a chance that if this goes through and if this is upheld with what we're seeing with our relationship with China? I mean, today there was stories about the possibility of Chinese-owned routers being problematic. Like, what precedent does this set for Chinese companies operating here in the United States?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Now, look, here, though, the court did specify that there's two specific issues with TikTok. So it's not just like a blanket ban overall. And their two main issues are first with data collection and second with the possible content manipulation. But look, what they did say is that this is all pretty speculative, right? It's hypothetical. There's no clear harm that is instituted at this moment. And that's really where TikTok's biggest window is in terms of the argument that they hope to present to the Supreme Court. I did have the opportunity to hear directly from Andy Pincus, the outside counsel for TikTok, and he really said that this imminent harm is not real and that the threshold to determine whether or not it's imminent is if it's happening now, not just if it's speculative and might happen. So that's what TikTok is trying to do, argue that the action is too strong given the constitutional right to free speech that exists.
Angela Sinandella, the best lawyer out there on TikTok. Angela, thank you.
Thanks.
And as the feds prepare for mass deportations under the incoming Trump administration, there are still major questions about costs, resources, and consequences. And NBC's Gabe Gutierrez got an inside look at one operation pretty far from the southern border.
The operation begins before dawn. Agents with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who asked us to conceal their identities, gearing up at a parking lot in suburban Boston. We're along for the ride.
We don't do large-scale roundups. Every individual that's here today has come to our attention because they've been arrested by a local municipality for a felony or an egregious crime.
So after several hours of waiting, they've just found one of their targets, and we're on the move. When we arrive, we see an immigrant from the Dominican Republic who ICE says is here illegally and is a convicted sex offender. He tells me he came to the U.S. for a better way of life and denies the charges against him. He's led away in handcuffs. ICE agents had been watching this particular subject for at least a week. On this day, it took about 16 ICE agents to arrest 5 immigrants who ICE says are undocumented, have criminal records, and had been released on bail by local jurisdictions instead of being turned over to ICE, each requiring 40 to 80 hours of surveillance beforehand. Do you have enough resources to do this?
No, we don't. And that's one of the problems that, when jurisdictions don't cooperate with us, we have to go out into the community, which puts our officers at risk.
But these are the waning days of the Biden administration. President-elect Trump won, pledging to do much more, including mass deportations. And after Democratic city and state officials vowed to block Trump's deportation plan, incoming border czar Tom Homan is doubling down with this warning.
If they cross that line and knowingly harbor and conceal illegal alien, well, I'm going to seek prosecution.
I am concerned of what a mass deportation would look like for
Attorney Valerie Napier is an immigrant advocate who says calls to her clinic have tripled since Trump was reelected.
What do you say to those people who voted for Donald Trump and wanted a crackdown in the immigration system?
Not everyone is a criminal.
We pressed ICE about its current mission. There are some who fear that ICE will also arrest immigrants that are here that may not have criminal records. To that, you say what?
To that, what we are focused on is obviously public safety, national security threats. But then there are those too that have exhausted all legal means. In the end, they've been ordered legally removed from the United States, and we'll go ahead and effect those removal orders.
And Gabe Gutierrez joins us now. Gabe, ICE has reportedly been underfunded for some time. How is it supposed to work here?
Well, Gadi, 2 U.S. officials tell NBC News that before any of these mass deportation plans, ICE is already facing a budget shortfall of, get this, $230 million. So there are a lot of real questions about how this deportation plan will actually work once Trump takes office. And now Republicans were expected to fund ICE at least through March because of that continuing resolution that until just a short time ago was expected to pass. Now there are a lot of questions about where that's going to go. And then there are many more questions next year about how that all gets funded. So we shall see, Gadi.
Yeah, we shall wait and see. Gabe Gutierrez, thank you, bro. And coming up, keeping an eye on the skies, our Tom Costello gets an exclusive look at the TSA and FBI bomb detection unit, how they are preparing for the next threat. But first, you gotta see this. Apparently, they auctioned the complete tablet of the 10 Commandments, the winning bidder buying it for more than $5 million. That tablet was discovered in Israel in 1913, but it dates back 1,500 years ago. The buyer for the 115-pound slab is anonymous. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Here are some of the stories happening out west that we're following right now. Police are investigating the murder of a bus driver in Seattle. This happened early this morning. They say he was stabbed in the chest after a fight with a passenger. No arrests have been made yet, and officials say it was the first time a bus driver has been killed on the job in Seattle in more than 25 years. And the FBI is looking into what led to the death of a cruise ship passenger. This happened last week on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship headed to Mexico from Los Angeles. Witnesses say the man threatened passengers before being detained by crew members. It's unclear exactly when the man died after being restrained. And thousands of people in parts of Oregon and Washington lost power today after strong winds coming off the Oregon coastline ripped through the area. Some local schools opened late while others didn't open at all. Crews are still working to make repairs and restore service. And just in the last few hours, we are learning new details about a brutal alleged abduction and robbery at an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado, that so many people have been talking about for months. Immigration officials are now saying more than a dozen Venezuelan nationals are in ICE custody tonight after a home invasion there, all of them in the country illegally, according to officials, and they are suspected of being part of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. And NBC's Valerie Castro has late developments tonight.
A Colorado apartment complex plagued by suspected Venezuelan gang activity in the spotlight again after a brutal kidnapping.
They were pistol whipped, they were beat, they were victimized, they were terrorized.
Police say on Monday night, more than a dozen people approached a man and a woman, forcing them into an empty apartment where they were held against their will, and the man was stabbed. The two victims were released by the assailants after they promised not to call police, authorities say.
It appears that they are immigrants that came, again, with the Venezuelan community that was brought here. The fact that they stepped forward, I think it shows, again, the incredible amount of courage that they had.
Police say 19 people were initially detained in connection to the attack. Tonight, 16 are in Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody, according to an ICE spokesperson who says they are all Venezuelan nationals in the country without authorization. Authorities now investigating whether they're members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua or TDA.
There is a high assumption that they may be affiliated with the TDA gang. But again, I am not going to say 100% positively until that is validated and verified.
Aurora police say they are finally able to solve a mystery that's been lingering for weeks.
The same housing complex was thrust into the national spotlight earlier this year after one resident released doorbell camera footage of what looks like an armed group of young men entering a neighboring apartment. Some of the men in the video were later arrested in New York, according to ICE officials, saying they were members of TDA. The video helped spark a political firestorm.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Then former President Donald Trump visiting the city, launching Operation Aurora, his plan for a mass criminal deportation effort.
I will rescue Aurora and every town that has been invaded and conquered. These towns have been conquered. Explain that to your governor. He doesn't have a clue.
The mayor and police chief, while recognizing the city's broader gang problem, pushing back on claims by Trump and others that the city is overrun by gangs.
It's not overrun, without question. Aurora is still a very safe city. It is still a wonderful community that is incredibly diverse.
But at least one local leader says the problem isn't being taken seriously.
I am tired of this being portrayed as just another gang in Aurora. This is so heinous.
As political fights continue, city leaders in talks to close that complex as they look for a more immediate solution.
Valerie Castro, thank you. And the TSA says they have stopped some 5,000 guns at airport checkpoints in the first 9 months of this year. That's about 19 guns a day. In other words, they're pretty effective at it. And now they're also using special technology to detect explosives. Our Tom Costello got an exclusive look at how this works.
On a highly restricted range at the Redstone Arsenal near Huntsville, TSA and FBI experts replicate explosives from the latest terror threats.
3, 2, 1.
And test the technology to spot explosive devices.
The goal is to be able to utilize the brightest and best when it comes to understanding the chemistry behind explosives and explosive devices.
The TSA's newest CT scanners flag potential explosives or hidden weapons.
Here's the 3D printed gun, small 22, two knives, and a smoke grenade.
Do you see these types of weapons every day?
Every day, all across checkpoints in the United States, and our CTs help us be able to detect these types of items.
So far this year, more than 6,000 weapons detected, another record. But it will take until 2042 to roll out the best scanners to all airports. A top priority now, explosives found this year at DHL cargo facilities in Europe, which Western intelligence believes Russian agents planted. At the FBI TSA lab, chemists and technicians recreate explosive mixtures, analyzing the chemical signatures to test airport detection systems.
The way that an explosive is molded can make all the difference, in this case, causing a significant dent in a 1-inch piece of steel. Molded differently, the same explosive blew a hole right through, causing catastrophic damage.
And the threat matrix is changing daily.
These are 3D printed firearms, fully functional, that have the capacity to function as a normal firearm.
Assistant FBI Director Eric Pokarak with a sampling of 3D printed weapons and the 3D printers they use to recreate potential threats, even a Claymore mine.
Is the 3D printed weapon or explosive one of your most serious challenges today?
It's definitely a serious challenge that we have, because they are just as lethal as traditionally manufactured IEDs or firearms.
Nationwide, the TSA is now deploying handheld explosive ingredient detectors.
The threat landscape is changing, so we're constantly trying to stay ahead of what's coming next.
And one step ahead of a determined enemy. Tom Costello, NBC News, Huntsville.
That rack of 3D printed guns, incredible. Tom Costello, thank you. And still ahead, on the scene of a shocking assassination, our Keir Simmons is taking us to the streets of Moscow where a general was killed, plus what we know about a person in custody right now. It's coming up straight ahead. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. While the power vacuum in Syria is Iran's loss, it might just wind up as Turkey's gain. Officials in the United States say that Turkey could be on the verge of carrying out military operations in Syria in a big way, and they are targeting the Kurdish people there. The conflict between the Turkish and Kurdish forces traced back to the Kurdish separatist movements in the 1970s. And we told you about 7 tourists in Fiji who got really sick after having cocktails. We've got some updates. Tourism officials say that after toxicology results, no methanol or illicit material was found. The investigation hasn't wrapped up yet, but all 7 people have recovered. And in France, verdicts are expected tomorrow in a historic rape trial. This comes after 3 months of stunning testimony. The victim in the case is now 72 years old. She was allegedly drugged by her husband for years, allowing for dozens of men to allegedly rape her. And in India, 13 people are dead after a naval ship collided with a ferry off the coast of Mumbai. That ferry, carrying more than 100 people, capsized and 99 people were pulled out of the water. The Navy ship lost control after an engine malfunction. And Russian officials say they have the man they think is behind the killing of a senior general. As we told you yesterday, that general was killed by a bomb hidden outside his apartment earlier this week. And today, our Keir Simmons went down to the scene of the explosion for a closer look.
Hey there, it's pretty extraordinary to be standing here. This is where Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov was assassinated just over 24 hours ago. You can see the power of the explosion, the bent metal, the bricks blown away from the wall, some people leaving flowers. And just today, Russian authorities saying that they now have a suspect in custody. Russian media saying that that is a man called Ahmed Kabanov. 29 years old, from Uzbekistan. He was detained outside Moscow, according to reports here in Russia. And Russian media now showing a videotape of him apparently confessing, saying that that has come from Russian authorities. Of course, he is under arrest, under duress. We only have the testimony of the Russian officials, of the Russian media, that he has in fact confessed to what happened here. But standing here, you can see just what a precision operation this was, because the general would have walked out of the apartment here and there was a car waiting just in the street, so a very short distance away for this explosion to take place. It was filmed from the back of a car we think was very likely parked around about where that red vehicle is there, across the street. And according to Russian investigators, the explosives were attached to a scooter leant against the wall here and remotely detonated. The video of the explosion, according to Russian investigators, was sent back to Ukraine, was being watched in Ukraine as this happened. The Russians are saying that they are determined to catch everybody responsible. What isn't being said so loudly here is, how was it possible for an assassination to take place like this right here in the heart of Moscow, on a general who is widely thought to be the most senior military official killed, assassinated on Russian soil since the war in Ukraine began.
Incredible view there. Thank you so much, Keir. We've got some breaking developments in that Wisconsin school shooting. The medical examiner's office has now identified the victims of the Abundant Life Christian school shooting. The three victims are 42-year-old Michelle West and 14-year-old Ruby Vergara, and 15-year-old Natalie Rupnow was also named. She is a suspected shooter. The report also says that two of the victims were pronounced dead at the scene, and the last one died at the local hospital. We're going to keep following this breaking news for more updates, and we'll be back after this short break. Time now for the future of everything, a school that's getting the highest kind of marks for job training. That's coming up next. But first, Cape Canaveral is getting a big space investment. Today, Florida's Space Board approved negotiations on a grant worth almost $2 billion. Now, the company involved in the project has not yet been named, but you know, this is part of a Florida area that's already home to companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and of course the NASA Kennedy Space Center. So we'll see what happens next. And finally tonight, we are looking at the future of education in Arizona. And I don't know about you, but when I was in high school, hearing the last bell of the day was music to my ears. But for some kids out in Arizona, that bell means normal school is over, doctor school is about to begin. That's right, we've all heard of STEM, but this is super healthcare specific. Kind of school that Doogie Howser would have only dreamed of. So we sent NBC's Dr. Akshay Sayal back to school to check it out.
I'll have you do blood pressure just like you do a normal patient.
Parker Summons is one of nearly 1,000 students enrolled in one of the most unique schools in the country.
Which pulse do you want to do? We can do radio, brachial, carotid, and also...
It's all part of a network of programs called Pima JTED in Tucson, Arizona, immersing high school students into the world of healthcare. The goal? To help solve the healthcare worker shortage, with some estimates predicting a deficit of 100,000 workers by 2028.
I'm curious, why do you think we're seeing such a big shortage of healthcare workers?
I hate to say this, but I think part of it is we're aging out.
Beth Francis, a former nurse, helped bring it all to life.
I have had the pleasure of working here at JTED for almost 16 years.
I'll lift you up on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Here's how it works. When the bell rings at the end of the school day, students across southern Arizona head to JTED to master real-world skills.
Today, we are just going to be talking about pulse.
It's kind of like an after-school program, but for healthcare, where they can actually leave with a certification in hand. Cindy Rankin is a JTED board member and an associate professor at the University of Arizona. She says it's all about the exposure.
Most kids know doctor, nurse, and pharmacist, and they don't know about the whole group that make up the team.
In this building, students trade sticky notes for stethoscopes and learn about topics not usually taught in high school.
What if you could not only learn how to do math, but learn what it's like to give medication to a patient, learn how to do a dosage or learn how to do a drip rate, and have some type of application for that student.
They learn real-world skills, like how to draw blood. I'm here with Alex Gonzalez, who's a student here at JTED, who's gonna be drawing my blood for me.
Would you like a stress ball?
Sure, I'll take a stress ball.
Wow, look at that. First try. Didn't hurt at all.
And on top of this, they also have access to incredible state-of-the-art technology.
So we have our mannequin here, and it's really cool because you can see I can adjust the eyes. So let's say we're having some kidney problems, we can jaundice, so you'll see the yellow discoloration. You can also have bloodshot eyes.
Oh, wow.
So let's say I'm over there in the observation room and our patient starts coughing. Or let's say that our patient's kind of having a hard time.
My chest is tight.
Oh my God. What's your favorite thing you've learned so far?
I honestly like taking all the vital signs. It's a lot easier than people think.
Parker's father, a travel nurse, tragically lost his life in a helicopter accident when Parker was just 3 years old.
He was a flight nurse, and he would, of course, help people who needed those situational help. It was an inspection that had gone wrong on the helicopter, and it crashed shortly after they had taken off.
For him, getting certified in the medical field is not just a unique opportunity, it's a personal one.
I'm definitely most excited to learn about the influence I have on people and what they want to do with their lives. So, of course, like what my dad was to me, I can maybe be that to someone else.
Wow, what a full circle moment, and what an incredible school. I love the part where he's like, you want a stress ball? And you're like, yes, I will take a stress ball, as this high schooler draws blood, right? So I gotta ask, how long did it take for you, when you went through medical school, to start doing the things that these high schoolers are doing?
Well, I certainly wasn't doing this in high school. And I think, what Dr. Rankin had said in the piece there is just so important, where most people know about what a doctor is, what a nurse is, even what a pharmacist is. But there's such a big part of the healthcare team that people don't know about, myself included, really until you start getting into the hospital, until your latter half of medical school, which happens in your 20s for most people. So the fact that they're learning about this at age 14, 15, 16 years old, I think is really, really big. And as we heard in the piece, there is a pretty big healthcare shortage, healthcare worker shortage out there. So we're hoping this can kind of help spur some interest.
Absolutely. And I imagine that now having this school on your resume or your application when you're trying to get into med school, people are going to see that and they're going to be like, oh, all right, they know a lot going in here. But the certifications, what kind of certifications are they leaving high school with?
There's a whole host of them. So Gadi, people who are doing these classes after school, after their normal high school, they head over to this program. It's things like social worker training. It's medical assistant training. There's a whole host of them on your screen. You can see there, emergency medical technician or EMT, healthcare foundations, which is just a basic sort of understanding of science, and pharmacy technicians, as we mentioned. So, all of these things that you see here, I certainly didn't know existed when I, decided I wanted to become a doctor. And I think most people don't, because you don't really see those things in the TV shows. You don't really see them in this sort of popular media, but they're all working behind the scenes, and they're all just as important for the healthcare team.
And I know you're an instructor of medicine over at UCLA. How did these kids compare with your first year, second year med students?
Hey, like you said, he got it on the first try. It's better than most med students, so very impressive.
Dr. Akshay Sayal, thank you so much.
Anytime.
And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.